Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show here at a musician's compound, which is owned by the late wife of the great bass player Larry Gales. And what an honor it is to bring in a gifted pianist who's played with all the cats, the real cats. Bobby West, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much, Jake, for having me.
Can you talk about how Horace Tapscott would create, how he got through to you guys, how to create spiritual music?
Well, I think I would have to start with probably the most important answer I got from Horace. As a very young man, I came from a traditional background. My people are from the South, obviously Black Baptist. So there wasn't a lot of talk about art and about jazz and these type of things. But Horace was the first artist to come to me and approach me as to how this music relates to being a man. There was a lot of emphasis on manhood during the time in the 70s when I was studying with Horace as a very young man. And he helped me to understand that this music was not frivolous, that the music was important, and more specifically, or more importantly, the music is sacred, actually. And so through studying with him, he really introduced, I guess you would call, aesthetics, which I wasn't getting from anywhere else. And Horace kind of laid it out to me in easy.
What aesthetics? Which aesthetics?
How music can help contour a person's personality. How music can incorporate all kind of assets from discipline. Music can this music, improvised music, can be so helpful when it comes to everyday things of life, as even if it regards patience, or if it regards finding the true meaning of one's existence, and the introduction to the glorious, elusive, kind of vague world of art. And so I was a piano player, and in meeting Horace, he kind of showed me the difference between a musician and a musical artist.
Dig. Well, can you cut that fine line right there? That's what my show has become about.
Well,
and people want to see your face, so look right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The difference between an artist and a musician.
A musical artist and a musician.
Yeah. Well, I think you can be a musician and you don't necessarily have to be an artist. I think that there are many musicians who are professional, very successful, and they live fulfilling lives as musicians. I think that there is a difference between a musician who aspires to be an artist. An artist comes with a lot more responsibility. To approach art where a musician becomes an artist is a very personal kind of thing. You pretty much have to commit to whatever it is that you think that requires for you to be an artist. Me personally, since I guess I've been preoccupied with the word and the title or the expression pretty much my entire life, I had always thought that an artist has a lot more responsibility. They represent the upperclassmen of students, because we always study this music. We never ever master it. So I think that an artist is kind of a pedigree, if you would, and I had always heard the word throughout my studies and my life and time. So maybe when I was in my early 40s, I would say, now I believe that I qualify to call myself an artist. It's kind of vague as to I'm so sorry, Jay.
Yeah, my brother. People having a ball. Go ahead.
Yeah.
How did Horace show you that on the bandstand?
Almost everything Horace taught was by example. He was the embodiment of what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He never really spoke of it, and Horace being the most unconventional of teachers, his own self-styled way of teaching was by example. And through that, as a student, I think most students learn quicker if there is some demonstration. I could tell you a formula, but if I played it, it would mean something else to you.
Sure.
I could tell you a formula, and if I played it and you watched my fingers or you watched the keyboard, it would have another kind of effect on you. So by Horace being so demonstrative, it was very easy to learn from him. Even to this day, I can study something, and theoretically, but if I watch somebody do it, I don't know if this applies to everybody, but it certainly applies with me. If I see someone demonstrate it, my knowledge of it or me learning it would come just that much quicker.
Can you play a sanctified? Did you bring the sanctified sound into the jazz when coming from the South?
Almost had to, because I grew up in, no disrespect, Grandma, I was raised by my grandparents who were hyper-religious, Black Baptist people from northern Louisiana. And
so that was they laid on everything.
Yeah, I was playing piano in the church by the time I learned how to walk. And my grandmother aspired for me to be an organ-playing minister one day.
Kicking pedals.
Yeah. And
so you sang too? No,
I didn't. I've never aspired to do that. I've always had this kind of tunnel vision that was just centered toward
why don't you lay out for the peeps? Play something for the peeps.
Okay, well, you mentioned about the sanctified thing.
Yeah.
Coming up, when I was a child, my people did not allow secular music in the house. I'm certain we've all heard that old Southern cliche, old black cousin, that this is the devil's music.
Yeah.
My grandparents really believed that. So I would practice my classical piano at home with my grandparents, and I would have to practice my blues at school or at the library that had a piano.
What were the consequences if you were caught playing that?
Well, my grandparents were severe disciplinarians. I'll just put it to you like that.
I dig. Okay, yeah, but yeah.
So, how my young uncle, who is only about 4 or 5 years older than me, how he would sneak these records into the house would be, he would bring in records by Gene Harris. He'd bring home a Gene Harris record.
Three sounds, yeah. Bobby West, man, crushing it. Hey, look at the camera. People want to see you. Alvin Batiste.
Wow.
All right, let's go back. When did
Wow.
you? I mean, because I was just in New Orleans.
Wow.
All right, and
That's a name.
so I mean, talk about how you connected with Batiste Senior.
You know, I think I owe a lot of this to me going to Grambling State University, one of the quote unquote celebrated black universities in the northeast part of Louisiana. And as a second year composition major, there was a concert given by a group called the Jazzstronauts. And I remember,
Jazzstronauts.
yeah, I remember seeing posters around school saying, "What a crummy name for a band.
I dig it now.
What a terrible name." But everybody was talking about this man, known affectionately as Bat. Bat. I mean, like a baseball bat, like a bat. And of course, we found out he was the clarinet virtuoso, theoretician, and educator, the Honorable Alvin Batiste.
Alvin Batiste.
And he came to Grambling State. They came from Grambling State's rival, Grambling State University in the north. We have the football team and the famous Marching Tigers. Our arch rival, it has to be in the same state. It's at Southern University, which is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, about 500 miles south. So we were rivals in football teams and the marching band and what have you. So here comes Mr. Batiste, already a revered instructor at Southern University. Now he's bringing his whole band that were made up largely of his students. And that band included the extraordinary bass player named Randy Jackson. You might know Mr. Jackson if you've ever watched American Idol.
How old was Randy then?
Randy,
Like 10 years old?
no, Randy's the same age I am.
Wow.
So-
American Idol. There you go, peeps.
This guy played electric bass like Jaco Pastorius.
The Jazzstronauts.
This guy had such an amazing command of the electric bass. I had never heard any. This was even before I heard Jaco. And it was just unforgettable. Just the bass player. He used the drummer. His name is Herlin Riley.
No. I was hanging with cats down in New Orleans, and Herlin's. I mean, he is the there's a lot, but he's one of the
Definitely.
the vibration makers down there. So I need to catch a hang with that cat. So that was,
I think he worked with Wynton up to maybe the last 5 years ago, maybe. But I think he was there with Wynton for almost 20 years.
Did you tour with Alvin Batiste?
No. Now I'm going back. When I saw them as the Jazzstronauts, I was a 17-year-old freshman at Grambling State. I met the pianist. I'm telling you about this incredible band. Was blind.
Yeah.
And he was virtuosic, and I had never really seen anybody play like that. Maybe besides Horace, because I'd already started studying with Horace before my first year of university. But he was the celebrated pianist Henry Butler, who went on to do several records for Impulse Records, among all the other things that he did. But he was a very young Henry Butler in the Jazzstronauts. And of course, that was Mr. Alvin Batiste. I'm telling you, I was blown away by them. Fast forward to years later, I left Grambling State, came back to LA, taught public school for a couple of years and didn't like it. The old college band got back together. We regrouped and moved to New Orleans. And there we found management, and we did a couple of records, and we got some tour dates, and we stayed in New Orleans for the next 4.5 years. And
Who was in that band?
Oh my goodness. Well, among others, a young Branford Marsalis. Jake, it's not a story I tell a lot.
I was Branford. I mean, I want to hear about this, baby.
Okay, we're there with our band. We're based in Baton Rouge, which is about 60 miles north of New Orleans. That's where Southern University is. So we wanted to. Our band was very popular, playing in the clubs around Baton Rouge and Louisiana and other nearby cities and towns. So we had kind of a name at the time, strictly top 40 show band with the horn section and the whole thing. We needed to replace a saxophonist who wanted to go back home. His wife was pregnant. And there was a young man who wanted to get in the band, and he was pledging a music fraternity. I believe it's a black music fraternity called Phi Mu Alpha. And a young man came, and it was Branford at 18. And he was already an extraordinary, I mean extraordinary musician. He got the job, and he was in the band for about an hour, for about a year. And during that time, every now and then he would say, "Well, can my little brother show up?" We did a performance in a place called Hammond, Louisiana, and he says, "I brought my kid brother. He wants to play trumpet." And I just remember this day. He's this kid. He's got this perfect, huge afro. He's already wearing a blue velour blazer and some Italian loafers, and he had one of those horn cases where you could fit like 3 trumpets inside of it, or a trumpet and a flugelhorn. Big old case. And this guy was walking in with such a swagger, and there was no such word at the time as swagger, but this kid had it. And Branford said, "This is my kid brother Winton." And then that night we played Kool and the Gang, and Funkadelic,
wow,
and Tower Power, and they seemed to know all of the parts. At any rate, we soon found out that Branford was something of a genius kid, certainly prodigious, with one hell of a personality, as I might add. And so we worked together. Some of the other guys in the band was a guitarist named Ray Mouton. He lives in your state of Arizona, in Phoenix. He had worked with Billy Cobham the same time that Billy Cobham had hired Mr. Batiste. I forget the name of the record, but Mr. Cobham was a big fan of Alvin Batiste. So he did a record after Billy Cobham had all the success with the Spectrum album and the George Duke record. He was at his peak powers as far as with the record labels. So he came down and he hired Mr. Batiste and Ray Mouton and another guitarist named Charlie Singleton, who was also in our band. And that's how we saw Mr. Batiste as a theoretician, educator, band leader that kind of like went to rock star, because that record got him a lot of prominence. And interestingly enough, one of the last records that Cannonball Adderley did, he enlisted Mr. Batiste. I don't want to call out the wrong title of the LP, but it was one that was very close to Cannonball's last. And so he incorporated Mr. Batiste. Turns out that Cannonball had been trying to get Mr. Batiste to leave New Orleans, give up his life as a happy square and a college professor, and to come on and be a jazz guy. And Mr. Batiste opted not to do that, and to stay in Louisiana and become the legendary, revered instructor that he is to this day.
What's the closest thing that you played to hoodoo music?
Okay, the closest thing.
Or you can just play, or you can break out what you think it is. I mean, you have your own interpretation. You've been steeped in it for a long time.
I don't know. I'm gonna do. There used to be a guy down, and his name was James Black. Wow, he was incredible.
He's a drummer, right?
That's right.
Yeah, no, James Black was, he was in Angola with Charlie Neville, actually.
I sit corrected.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm talking about James Booker.
Oh, Booker, man.
Booker.
Yeah, but
you hip to James Booker?
Man,
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
With the patch?
George Porter was just talking to me about James Booker.
Wow, he was something else. no match for Mr. James Booker.
You
What
know-
an extraordinary guy.
And you make it look so easy. But the skipper Henry Franklin. I mean, I see all these you know, these iconic figures on your wall.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness.
You know, I mean, how have you stayed below? Like, how have you been able to stay below the baseline your whole life? In terms of not, I don't know. But Bobby West was a bass player with the Crusaders.
That's right.
You're Bobby
right.
West, the piano player.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I. And
So what I'm saying is, like, I mean, like, was that a conscious decision for you to stay low, or like, I mean, I don't want, because you've had quite a bit of success. It's just,
Yeah.
You know, some people just don't choose to raise their profile, or they do it very organically.
You know, Jake, that is a damn good question.
Well, you can think on it.
You know, it's a damn good question. But, you know, I met Bob West, the bass player.
You did, badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People might not know that when the Jackson 5, I'm going back to his days at Motown, when the Jackson 5 first broke out, there were a team of writers that wrote their first 2 or 3 albums, 20, 30 songs. Their writers for them were exclusively called the Corporation, and they included 5 or 6 writers, and one of the writers was Bob West. I think the first time I ever saw my name.
Get out of here, really?
I think the first time I ever saw my name on a record was I was always the kind of kid that would read the fine print and see who wrote it and who published it and what label it is and all that. But when I saw that this guy's Bob West, they were all part of the Corporation. There were some other famous people that was in that group. I don't want to say the wrong names. But yeah, he made a fortune with those early Jackson 5 records. And they were so successful that he had an opportunity to stop playing. And he got involved with racing cars. He was very much into fixing and refurbishing race cars. And he kind of got into that.
Right.
And then he played when he wanted to. And then he decided he wasn't going to play electric bass anymore. And concentrate on the concentrate on the acoustic bass. And so I met him at a hotel over in East LA, my goodness, 30 years ago. And somebody introduced him as Bob West. I said, so you the Bob West from Detroit? The
Crusaders.
Yeah, the Crusaders. I'm like, James Taylor, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not...
This guy, he really got around. And it was just the strangest thing seeing him wearing a tuxedo, you know, in a hotel, a lobby lounge. And
right.
I think I put it to him in a way like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, making a living.
You know, can you, for people that are going to watch this in 5 years or 20 years or well after we're gone,
Mm-hmm.
What did Larry Gales mean to music? Not just his playing, but also his ability to... every cat that you've connected with along the way has been about fostering a community.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk about his significance on the whole enchilada there?
Well, you said the right word. The community is right here. This is the house that Mr. Gales built after his apprenticeship, then his illustrious career as being the most recorded bassist with Mr. Monk. And he also has the distinguished...
That's ridiculous. Who was playing who played drums with him most of the time?
Ben Riley, Charlie Persip, Frankie Dunlap, all those guys kind of changed around. But once Larry got there, like 63, 62, 63, he was pretty much the bassist up until Monk's death in the early 80s. Although...
Do you think he helped Monk stretch his music? Or was he just really there to make sure that he had to lock it in?
There had to be something significant because there's that distinguished thing about him being with Monk the longest. Monk was known to be difficult. Monk was known to be eccentric. And he didn't necessarily speak in musical terms all the time.
No. He'd
And
get up,
so,
start dancing around.
And so as a result of that, if you look at Monk's discography from the late 40s until the mid 60s, I mean, like he went through just about every great bass player there was who played jazz. I mean everybody from Oscar Peterson to
Oscar Peterson.
no, Oscar Pettiford.
Oh, Pep.
Oscar Pettiford.
Oscar
D.
Peterson, the piano.
I'm doing a radio interview.
Yeah,
Bob. Oscar Pettiford.
no, we're live to the world on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's full video. It's
Yeah.
fine. He can hang.
Yeah, you can hang.
You can hang,
Bob.
dude. It's all good.
Yeah, and but I'm just saying, once Monk had Mr. Gales under his employ, I'm not sure as to what happened that made this relationship more fruitful than anyone he had had with any previous bass player. Knowing and remembering Mr. Gales as I did, it could all have to do with Mr. Gales and his gregarious nature.
This house is musicians live in this house.
Yes. Mr. Gales bought this house. When do you think he bought this house, Bobby? Okay. But he was very
What a
much,
what a great neighborhood, man.
Yeah.
It's such a great neighborhood. There's a lot of cars in the front.
I remember it being. Miss Gales is also a very fine pianist in her own right.
Miss Gales is.
Yeah, and her name is Rose Gales. She's very much alive and well. She's having her beauty sleep now.
She's missing out, man. I would love to get her on the piano, man.
I know.
Rose Gales.
Rose
Did she
Gales.
play it at the coffee house?
Oh yes.
Oh, man.
Yes. Oh yes. And she still plays.
Oh, man.
I wouldn't wager her age, and I certainly wouldn't ask her.
But how have you tried in your own way to carry on the lineage of all the cats? I mean, you made mention earlier of this, and you said you never master the music. You just study it.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between studying it and then playing it with other people, and then expanding consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to younger cats about how the success you've had with thinking as one on the bandstand with people? I mean, do you play with cats that you don't feel? I mean, do you only get into situations like that Horace would be in, where it would just be based on substantial, everybody thinking as one?
Well, the thing with brave musicians like Horace is they have a chosen path, and then that's their chosen path. I have always admired that to no end. I've admired the courage that it takes to decide upon a chosen path and then stick with that path, thick or thin, broke or rich or what have you. I mean, to me, that is genuine. And I admire anybody who can actually do that. There are those people, and then you have journeyman people like myself who have to play to make a living, as a result of the varied interest, I have to play in different styles. I like to play in different styles.
Absolutely.
I have as much respect for hard bop as I do hip hop. I have as much.
You played with R. Kelly?
Yeah, how'd you know that?
I don't know. I mean, how did that come about? Did he just bring you in to play on?
How'd you know that, Jake? You got my dossier or something over there?
There's a dossier. It's called Google, man.
All right,
It's
that's
on
a big deal.
Yeah. R. Kelly, like did
We did his first record.
I just want to know if everybody was hitting at the same time, or did you come in to do an overdub? Such a popular cat, man. It's probably yeah.
I gotta take this.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap. I was just gonna have you play something for Billy Higgins because we're live.
Got to.
All right,
I gotta call him back.
Bobby. Well, yeah, just for Billy, like water. The elements at work, a divine connection. Thank you so much, Bobby West.
Thank you, Jake.